So, I was talking about how important it is to discuss values between ourselves and also eventually get into discussions about values with other people for several reasons. One of them is that we develop our vocabulary in which the values now become easy to think of. Like you were just mentioning a few minutes ago that some of the words were even hard to comprehend that were associated with positive feelings or a positive way of looking at things. So basically, many of us don't even have vocabulary to express our values very authentically. Many of these values are so unconscious. If they're being compromised, we could go to war for that. But if somebody asked us to actually verbalize what it is that we're fighting for, we would often have a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's kind of stupid, but it's what happens throughout human history.
Mm-hmm.
So if we understand why in hell we're fighting wars, I bet you, my bibi, as they say, that we're going to have a lot fewer wars. Because people will look at it as like, I'm fighting for that? I know, maybe not. Just forget about it. It would be just so silly to recognize that most of our wars and conflict happen for no good reason. Especially when we talk about interpersonal conflict. For example, within a family, like partners sometimes get into all kinds of squabbles. Or family members, brothers, sisters, parents, children, whatever. It's one of the most egregious examples of how unconscious people can be. Now, I don't want to say that value of family should be just demoted and thrown away. I'm saying that families are like the breeding ground for, and almost like a petri dish for unconsciousness. Because people are hardly ever talking about what they really value, what they really want. They often get into all kinds of reactivity, and it ends up just causing more conflict and grief. If we develop this type of consciousness, we'll be much clearer in our communication. We literally clear our filters of perception so much that not only do we perceive things better, the information exchange in the opposite direction also goes a lot more clearly without so much distortion. Because the filters distort no matter which direction the information goes through. So, is clarity one of your values? If it is, it will be satisfied by doing exactly this kind of practice. Another thing that also will contribute a great deal to both the clarity and the ability to facilitate breakthroughs for your coaching clients is exploration of those turning points along your journeys. So as you may recall, I was talking about how many of us experience certain setbacks or certain challenges or problems along the way. And at the time when we were experiencing them, they felt like a problem or a bad thing happening to us. But if we realize that it may actually be a lesson, and we start learning from that lesson, quickly enough we realize that it was a fantastic learning opportunity. We become grateful for having that in our lives, and we stop creating these kind of scenarios where we would need to learn that lesson again, because we already learned it. Now, this is going to be our next exercise. An exercise in discussing with each other our journey along the way when we encounter certain challenges or certain setbacks, and how we manage to overcome. We don't have to go over dozens of them. I think 2 or 3 will be plenty. But before we do that, I just wanted to bring up the question of resonance, because obviously this is one of those big hurdles that people run into. They don't use the terms like resonance. Instead, they use the terms like good and bad. And whenever people use this kind of terminology, or they believe in good and bad, they almost always creating more strife, because there's this perennial struggle between the forces of good and evil, described in pretty much all kinds of myths and legends. And that means that people have been thinking this way for a long time, which, by the way, also contributed to a great deal of wars and struggle throughout human history, right? Because this group of people decided this is bad and this needs to be eradicated, and our stuff is good and we want more of that. Well, if people on the other side of the tracks think otherwise, there's going to be war, or it's going to be some kind of conflict. And so if there is no division between good and bad, and instead we'll replace it with recognition of energy resonance, and some things resonate with us better than others, and it's an authentic experience that makes sense to us, even though to other people it doesn't have to make sense, because they have different energy and their resonance may be different. That's fine. And there is no need to prove anything to anyone or convince other people that this is good and this is bad. We don't have to rely on a social agreement about resonance, because it doesn't require social agreement. And also it is authentic in terms of the ability to change over time, and we are okay with that change. So in other words, what we resonate with yesterday, maybe not the same as what we resonate with today, or what we will resonate with tomorrow, and that's quite all right. We realize that we have certain energy transformation going on all the time, and if we trust that transformation, then we can go with the flow. In other words, we're not going to be holding on to these things that we resonated with yesterday, even though we don't resonate with today. We still have to hold on to it because it has some intrinsic value. No, it only has value as long as we resonate with it. That's why we talk about values and talk about resonance together, because different people resonate with different values. And there is no need to convince them that their values are wrong because we don't resonate with them. No, they should have these values that we resonate with. That would be thoroughly ineffective as coaching technique, or just completely violating the whole idea of integrity of the other person. However, we would be able to invite them to discover for themselves what they resonate with, and then inspire them through example to maintain that authenticity. If we don't present the example of authenticity, we can't really teach or coach them about it, because we are not walking our talk. So we have to walk our talk. And when we do that, then other people will trust us a lot better, and they will be able to follow suit or follow our example. So I'm going to ask you guys to grab a different person as a partner and discuss with that person for a short amount of time. Let's say 5 minutes each person, maybe 6 minutes each person maximum. 1 or 2 episodes in your life that were particularly challenging, but from which you actually gain a certain insight, a certain lesson, and now you no longer perceive those as problems. Okay? So let's grab a partner and spend the next 10 or 12 minutes discussing that.